This is the last in the three-part series that I'm going to be presenting, and Justin will be back next week to pick up in Luke where he left off. Thank you for not applauding. Appreciate that. A little bit of transparency. This has probably been the most difficult series that I've put together. When I preached full-time, I only preached in series, just the way I like to preach instead of standalone lessons. I never had more struggle than I had with this one, and primarily it's because of the subject material. Just a lot of sociological stuff going on. There's a lot of theological, there's a lot of polling and data and things like that out there, and philosophical. It's hard to get all that synthesized and get it down to a level where it's not only challenging, but doesn't put people to sleep. So it's really been a challenge, and I'll be honest with you, I'm very glad it's done. It's kind of like those of you who have spoken on Wednesday night. When 8 o'clock rolls around, two things are true. One, you're glad you did it. Two, you're glad it's done. And that's the way I feel about this series. I'm glad I did it, but I am glad it's done. I wanted it to be encouraging to you. When we're looking at the culture and how to communicate to our culture, it is so easy to be discouraged. We know who we are as Christians, and we know who we're supposed to exemplify, and we know the answers. We know the truth. And I'm not saying that in a proud way. It's just that we know God and we know His Son. And when we look at our feeds and we watch the news, it's hard not to get discouraged, because you can see some of the things that are going on out there, some of the things that are being promoted. Just basic reality is being denied. And truth is turned on its head, and the opposite of what is true is being promoted as true. It gets maddening. But I wanted not to focus on that, because I could get up here and I could do doom preaching, like doom scrolling. I could do doom preaching, and we could talk about all the things wrong with our culture, and we might get a kick out of that because it helps us to feel good about ourselves and talk about them. You know, the inside, the boundary set mentality. We're in, they're out, and it's good. Let's talk about how they're out and we're in. We all feel good. That doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help anything. I want us to be encouraged by what is going on in our culture, not all over, but in some significant ways to parts of our culture that are reawakening to spirituality. Just yesterday, I was looking at some results from a census taken about church attendance. And it, again, reveals that there's been an uptick in the number of people going back to church. And surprisingly, and I find this just so anti-intuitive, it's the Gen Zers that are leading the way. Those are the teens and 20-year-olds. More than any other generation are going back to church. And of those, men are going back more than women, which is completely upside down to what it usually is. And I think part of that is because, as we've talked about, in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, all the stories were just wiped out. They were all deconstructed. Nothing meant anything. It's all just a ploy. It's all just a scheme. It's all a scam. And there was a part of that story that talked about masculinity and how evil masculinity was, and chivalry was dead, and there was nothing in terms of chastity, and that's all just old. There's nothing there, and men are evil. Basically, you've heard the talk of masculinity. And you can only hear that so often as a male and be attracted to the opposite of that from someone who's talking about the opposite of that. And unfortunately, there's been some stories that have been offered to oppose that idea called the manosphere. I don't know if you've heard of that or not. It's been promoted by people such as Andrew Tate that have offered men the opposite of that. No, you're not evil. In fact, you have the power. It is your calling to make money, to dominate women. Your goal in life is to bed as many as you can. And they offer just a pseudo meaning, as I've talked about here, where this is the story you need to follow. And of course, we all know that there's no meaning in that story either. And so these Gen Zs are reacting to that and trying church. Now, this doesn't mean that they're pursuing biblical Christianity. I don't want to mislead you. They're not at this point. They're just more open to spirituality than they've ever been before. It's a story that they're willing to try. Let's stick our toes in this story. We've never been to church, don't know anyone who's really a Christian. Let's go see if there's some answers there. And so that's why we're seeing a return. So I want to talk today about seizing the moment. Because this is the pendulum swing. Like we do as humans and as cultures, we swing one extreme to the other, back and forth. Moderation is not our modus operandi. And so we have a moment. God has blessed us with an opening here that gives us an entree into someone's life to talk to them about the story, the true story, the story of stories. But the question is, what is our story? And I mean by that yours and mine. In this room, what is our story? Because, a solution is only a solution if there's a problem that's recognized that the solution solves. If we offer solutions for things our culture doesn't see as a problem, that's not a solution. No one's going to listen. No one's going to hear it. No one's going to care. Because we're not speaking to their problem. Dave Schaller is not going to go into the drugstore and spend hours in front of the shampoo rack trying to find a solution to his problem. And conversely, Will's not to go in and talk to the pharmacist and ask her about male part pattern baldness. Those are problems they don't have, and the solutions don't hit. When Paul went to the Areopagus, that's how you say it, Derek, you have to practice that, Areopagus. When Paul went to the Areopagus and stood up in front of all those people, he offered a solution to a problem. The problem for the Athenians was that they were so pagan, so focused on pleasing the gods, that they were anxious that they might have left a god out. And they didn't want to risk offending that god and bringing down his wrath on them. So they developed this idol, some kind of structure, to the unknown God. And Paul comes in front of them and says, you have a problem. And I have a solution to that problem. Let me tell you a story. There's a God that you don't know about. And I'm going to talk to you about it. Solution to the problem. You notice Paul didn't get up in front of them and start talking about law and grace. Why? That wasn't their problem. That was a Jew's problem at the time, a Jewish Christian. And so we have a whole book of Romans and we have a book of Galatians. That's all Paul talks about, is the difference between the law and grace. That was their problem. He designated, he found out what the problem was, and he offered them a solution. That's what we have to do. So what is the problem we're trying to solve? And do we have a story to solve that problem? So there's three things I talked about last week, but I only talked about them very briefly last week. The problems that our culture is dealing with, especially those that are looking for a new story. The first problem they have is this all there is? Is this world all there is? Is there nothing else out there? Is there no spiritual, no transcendent, no magical, no higher power? Is there nothing but this stupid rat race that I'm in every day that provides me no meaning? Is this all there is? And so, in an attempt to answer this itch that thankfully God gave us, He put this in us to always want more than what we see, what we can touch, and what we can see on a day-to-day basis. He put this yearning in us, and it's an itch that doesn't go away, but we seek to scratch it in all kinds of ways. And so our culture gets into Wiccan, gets into the paranormal, gets into witchcraft, gets into the worship of Mother Gaia. All those are scratches to stop the itch. Someone even suggested our big pursuit of the stars and going to Mars and planning it's just our attempt to reach out there to find something beyond us. Because we need to know there's more than I'm an evolved atom that was a fish once and crawled up on the land and turned into this and turned into that, and here I am. I got to be more than that. What am I? But that comes with another question, which is the other problem. I want to know that I'm part of this big something other than me, but I don't want to get swallowed up by it. I want to matter, me, individually. I want to know I matter. I want to know I have a purpose. I want to know that there's something that I contribute to this great thing, whatever it is. I don't want to get lost. I look up at the universe, that's wonderful, it's wondrous. I can believe that someone put this in order, but does he notice me? Is there a place for me? And can I contribute something of my own that matters to other people? I can self-author a story. I can make up a story about me, and I can put my own truths in it. But I need to know that the people that I relate to and connect to every day, that I can help them, that I can make a difference in their lives as well. That's that word kenosis that we talked about, the emptying of ourselves for someone else that Jesus is talked about in Philippians chapter 2. Thirdly, I need to know I'm not on this journey alone. I need help. I need to belong. I need to be part of a community. I can't find that. That's why loneliness is off the charts in terms of how many people admit to feeling lonely. We're good at individualism in our country, in our culture. We reward it, we brag about it, it's good to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. But God made us social creatures. And I need to know that there are other people who depend on me, who look to me, who welcome me, who want me, and who accept me. I was listening to a podcast this week where this teacher who ran a Bible chair at a university. A Bible chair is like a little community of Christians who buy a building at a university, and they promote religious classes and stuff like that. It's kind of a mission effort inside a public religious university, or public non-religious university. Anyway, they published a phone line for the college students and told them, if you have any questions, call the anonymous phone line, leave your question, and we'll occasionally put together public gatherings and we'll talk about the questions and offer some answers. And so they tracked the questions over 3 years, and they submitted all the questions to an AI program, and asked the AI program categorize all these questions by topic. The number one topic. Remember, secular school, state-run college. The number one topic in the second one wasn't even close. Were questions about sin and forgiveness. What that says is that these students were wondering, is there somewhere I can go with the person I know I am and get forgiveness. Where people will take me as I will, forgive me, accept me. That's powerful. Okay, those are the three things: transcendence, kenosis, and koinonia. I didn't call the last one koinonia, but that's what it is. Or no, communion. Being the Latin, I remember I interpret the communion by the Latin original meaning, which is togetherness, oneness, but together. Those are the three things. So, do you know of a story that fits those three? Anything come to mind? There's not a one of us in this room that doesn't have a story that answers those problems. And you know how I know that? Because I've listened to you. Every Wednesday night this summer. Tell your story. Think about what you've heard this summer in our stories. You've heard about suffering. You've heard about pain. You've heard about terrible childhoods, abandonment. But even through all that, what you heard was faith in God. You heard about trust in something beyond yourself, something that's out there, that's powerful. You've heard about people that were heroes, that were mentors, that you were in community with, who stepped in to fill a need that you had to rescue you from the struggles that you were raised with, who gave you hope, gave you answers. And when the answers weren't there, they just stood by you and gave you a sense of belonging. See, you each have that story. You know, the best part is, you don't have to memorize a verse to tell it. All you got to do is tell your story. And you will touch the culture. Because they're looking for what you have. You have the solution to their problems. You may not have known that, but think about what you've heard this summer. It answers all the questions. And it's something each and every one of us can do. Now, a couple things to consider as we consider this. As a community, there's inside and outside the church building. Let's talk about that way. Outside the church building, you're in relationships. There's opportunities there to tell your story, to listen for their story and tell your story without preaching. Did anyone feel like they were being preached to this summer? And all that was shared was anyone sermonizing? Nope. But there was power there. That's what can happen outside this building in our own relationships. But let's talk about what happens inside this building. If this is true, then we need to look at things a little different. If it's the story that convicts and the story that offers the solution to the problem, then we got to recognize that the number one priority for us is relationships. Not teaching, not sermons. We need a relationship to tell a story, to share a story, to hear a story. That doesn't mean teaching and sermons are irrelevant and unnecessary. No, it's not what I'm saying at all. But we got to recognize that our belief that the most important minutes are between 10:30 and 11:30 is not true. Those minutes before 10:30 and those minutes after 11:30 are just as important. Why? Because that's where the stories are being told. That's where the relationships are happening. It's very hard to have a relationship right here. This is called a monologue. I'm talking, you're listening. Not a lot of back and forth, not a lot of relationship. Now I can tell my story, yeah, but it's me, one story, that's it. When we break up after our last prayer, you're listening, you're talking to someone who's listening and talking to you. And you're hearing problems, struggles, opportunities to tell a story. For someone to come in and see these are people who are in relationship, these are people that are in communion with one another. I want a piece of that. I want to be seen. I want to be listened to. We'll get to the sermonizing and the teaching. We'll get to the grace and we'll get to righteous living. We'll get to all that. That's part of discipleship. That we got to get them to where they'll listen first and come and experience it. We need to make sure that we prioritize authentic and sincere communities. That's the last point. What they see is authentic. The minute they see a pretend Christian, we lost. A fake story, we lost. An unreal story, we lost. You know what's an unreal Christian story? A Christian that doesn't struggle. You know what an unreal Christian story is? A Christian who doesn't sin. We do that, we die. No one wants a part of that. That doesn't solve any problem. It's just another pretend story. And I think we're doing a great job at that. I am extremely proud of this church for that. I think 11 or 12 churches I've lived in my life, you guys are the best at that I've seen, that I've experienced. You're authentic and you're sincere, and I appreciate that. That's what we got to continue doing. I began this series by looking at some pictures that talk about our relationship to culture. This was the first one. Just trying to keep culture away from us. It's rising, it's getting worse, and it is, I think, in a lot of ways, getting worse. So what do? Just try to keep it out. Keep building those sandbags. Keep raising it to make sure it doesn't get to us. Next picture. Everybody back to the fort, back to the castle. If we have to deal with culture, we'll send them a text or a post. We'll bomb them. That's convicting. Or, next, we can just sequester ourselves. Don't worry about the culture. Who cares about the culture? The culture is all bad. There's nothing good there. We have no responsibility to evangelize or redeem it. We just need to take care of our own. Let them go to hell. That's their choice. They're making the decisions. They get what they deserve. Last one. Or we can tell a story. That's a hard graphic to come up with. I gave Becca the job. Give me a graphic of someone telling a story. That's hard to do, if you think about it. Because it looks like you're either in a classroom or a church or a counseling session or something, but that's what that's supposed to portray. Just one person sharing a story. I read a great line this week, and I'll end with this. Someone said that the shortest distance between a person and the truth is a story. Christ exemplified that every single day. Whenever he was confronted with an individual who needed to hear the truth, Rabbi, who's my neighbor? Let me tell you a story about this guy walking down the road and met up with some thieves. Master, why is that sinful woman touching you? Let me tell you a story about this guy who owed so much money he'd never repay it again. We need to tell our story. That'll bring him to the truth. And you have a story, and it's a great story. We just need to share it. Let's stand and sing.